Hey listeners, Chelsea here. Before we get started, a note on our content. This podcast centers on the history of beauty and fashion, and as such, we often discuss topics like fat phobia, diet culture, and weight loss. Detailed content warnings can be found in the episode description. The episode you're about to listen to in particular contains some pretty gross descriptions of medical symptoms, so bear that in mind if you know that that's going to be upsetting to you. Links to any photos we discussed during the episode can be found in our show notes, or you can head on over to our Instagram at Vanity Veritas Pod. Also, this is an adult show featuring adult themes and language, so bear that in mind if you choose to listen. All right, let's get into it.
Do we want to talk about how we can actually get this very chic look?
As long as I don't have to get a communicable disease.
Oh, I got bad news for you, girlie.
Here's the thing. Obviously, we can't all be so lucky to have actually gotten consumption. So, how do we fake it until we make it?
Welcome to Vanity Veritas, where three vain friends dive into the history of beauty, fashion, and culture, trying to figure out how we got here and why we care so damn much. We're your hosts, Chelsea Feltman,
Elizabeth Urbanczyk,
and Christina Cole-Geddes. In each episode, one of us will present a topic related to historical fads, fashion icons, and beauty standards in an attempt to connect the past with the present, always asking ourselves, does anything ever really change?
All right, Christina, I believe you have a contagious topic for us today. What are we talking about? This seems rough.
My friends, it is time for no makeup tutorials. Today, I am discussing the original clean girl aesthetic. We are talking about the chic, the fabulous, the deliciously ghoulishly, ghastly macabre, and morbid trend, tuberculosis!
Yay!
Can we go back to talking about the original clean girl trend? We're talking about
this
a
is
contagious disease?
not where I thought you were going with that.
I know that none of those words should go together. I do recognize that. I want to point this out. But, pals, when I say tuberculosis, what do you know? What pops up for you, right? What are you thinking about?
Ooh, me.
Yes, Chels.
It's a bacterial infection that affects the respiratory system.
Surely does.
And I know that it used to be called consumption.
Yes.
And it is famously seen in things like Moulin Rouge or Les Mis. Whenever a heroine coughs and then shows Satine famously turns around her handkerchief and it's spotted with blood, that's tuberculosis.
She's got the TB. I also, I believed for a long time, and now that I know that it is a bacterial infection, but I think I believed in the popular myth that basically your organs were getting squished together and you were starting to like bleed out internally, and that's why you would cough up blood.
Oh, interesting. Like from wearing a corset? Yeah,
like corsetry caused all of your organs to start to just like mush together like some sort of weird soup. That's what would cause the coughing up of blood.
Interesting.
I believed in that sort of. I say it like it's a religion. I believed in it.
I believed in it. I was going to say that's like the old-timey medicine of tuberculosis. I'm not going to get so into, but it's wild and bad history, and definitely doctors did believe for a very long time that it was like organs being squished together. There's some belief that corsetry caused it, which now we know it totally did not. It's sort of the other way around. Consumption very much affects corsetry, which we'll get into. And other things like, the easy breezy medical belief that like women were coughing up period blood at one point.
They were obsessed with period blood.
They were so obsessed with it.
They were mystified by it. Why were they so mystified by period blood?
Because they were just so, the patriarchy was in such a weird little boy phase where they were just like, ew, it's blood!
Gross. Oh my God.
It's so wild. Listeners, I do want to point out the term consumption will be used from this point forward interchangeably with the word tuberculosis. Tuberculosis is most famously called consumption kind of as we get into the 19th century particularly, and that's because it would literally consume your body. You would waste away. I'm also going to be talking mainly about like the Eurocentric perspective and effects tuberculosis had. We do see it all over the world. So, tuberculosis is a terrible disease. It's maybe the oldest disease
What's
and the
Max
deadliest.
say?
Shocker. How?
I'm learning things already, Christina.
It's maybe the oldest and deadliest disease in the world. And yet, for this very brief period, from about 1830 to 1870 in the West, tuberculosis heavily influences to the point of dictating the style, beauty, and fashion of the era. Women wanted to emulate the, quote, elevated beauty attained only by the malady that was consumption. Thinness to the extent of wasting away, fairness that came from an insurmountable attack on your immune system, and bodies that mimicked someone enfeebled by mourning were the look du jour, and these things indicated that you were not only fashionable, but that you were pious, virtuous, the epitome of femininity, and most importantly, clean. And you were to achieve all of these things without any additional help.
Okay, Elizabeth and I...
Sorry. Hold on. In the words of Charlotte Bronte, consumption, I am aware, is a flattering malady. Now ask your question.
So sorry. It's just that when you said that it was a sign that you were clean, Elizabeth and I made the same befuddled expression.
Please, yes.
A bacterial infection. Mm-hmm. I know they didn't know about bacteria.
They did not.
But an infection that I am certain in other times in history had been associated with squalor and poverty and wretchedness.
Yes.
Is now a sign that you're clean?
So we will cover this, but you are totally right. And that is this weird moment in history of the dichotomy of how tuberculosis becomes fashionable, right? And when I say clean, what do you guys, like, you've given me a perfect segue, which is when I say the word clean girl aesthetic, what does that connotate for you?
The clean girl aesthetic is looking like you are wearing as little makeup as possible and accentuating your natural beauty, which only works if you are naturally beautiful.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Really. Like, there are people who are just like, I just wear a little concealer and chapstick and like a little brow gel and I'm good to go for the day. And I'm here like pounding on powder in the morning to go to my very boring office job. I'm just like, I just want to look human, but I have acne scars. So, I do not have the clean girl aesthetic.
Yeah, I was going to say no makeup, a dewy complexion, slicked back hair, the slicked back low pony.
Mm-hmm.
And like
dewy and low pony.
Yeah.
Something I could never pull off as somebody with oily skin and straight greasy hair.
I can look like sweaty Thomas Jefferson.
That's the look. That's the aesthetic I'm going for.
I'm always going for sweaty Thomas Jefferson. I'm really more of a Washington in my pool kind of vibe.
We've all done the pool Martha Washington.
The George Washington pool hair.
So it's the one thing I lost when I cut my hair short. You can't do the Washington pool hair with a pixie cut, and it's devastating, quite frankly.
Real bummer. Well, I want to point out that the things you have named aren't really that clean, quote unquote. There's nothing about that woman that you were like, oh, she's like fastidious. She's got Lysol in one hand and she's like spiffing up her house in another. Other words, by the way, for clean girl, when I kind of did some research, are you guys familiar with the vanilla girl or that girl?
I know that girl.
That's Marlo Thomas.
You're right. But the thing on TikTok is clean girl aesthetic, vanilla girl aesthetic, and that girl aesthetic all roughly mean the same thing. I'm sure someone is going to come for me in our hate mail and be like, they are not the same thing. But they are.
I just love the idea that we'd be getting hate mail. I love that we'd be famous enough.
We're so famous
hate mail.
for our hate mail. But I said vanilla girl was the same as that girl. But the idea of these women are generally speaking that they're beautiful, thin, white, and privileged, and that they always look pulled together. And the other phrase I heard a lot was that they look like they take care of themselves. That clean is the same as taking care of yourself, which equates to always having your nails done, always having good skin, always having nice hair, always looking very particularly feminine. I actually believe that the movement we're seeing right now from the majority of young white women, particularly on the internet, is a massively successful rebrand of consumptive chic.
Mm-hmm.
We are in the throes of our very own era of extremism in beauty. And I don't think that's that controversial to say. But in 1830 to 1870, that's like the sweet spot for the consumptive chic movement. And I actually believe that we are knee deep in our own. My thesis for this episode is that not only are we riding an aftershock of tuberculosis's effects, or at the very least, like we're sort of trapped in this ripple or its echoes, but I actually believe that we're currently in its sister epoch. What has become this quote unquote clean girl, no makeup, high maintenance to be low maintenance is all hearkening back to the Victorian ideals of morality being tied to quote natural beauty and quote unquote natural beauty that often has its ties to, again, thinness, whiteness, and immense economic privilege. This is epitomized in the consumptive chic era. And I really could not find a better way to express this attitude about tuberculosis at this time, at the time of like the mid 1800s, than by reading you this excerpt. Do you guys want to hear how consumption was described by a doctor in the 19th century?
1,000%. Can't wait.
Great. This is from a poem that was found in a medical text called Pulmonary Consumption from 1842.
I love that they had a poetry section.
Yes, of your medical text.
Not enough poetry in textbooks.
Agreed. With step as noiseless as the summer air, who comes in beautiful decay, her eyes dissolving with a feverish glow of light, and on her cheeks a rosy tint, as if the tip of beauty's finger faintly pressed it there. Alas, consumption is her name.
God.
That was a bad poem.
It's a bad poem, and it's romantically describing a horrible disease. Mm-hmm. There's something about including the word decay. It's just
not good.
Not how I want it.
Her eyes dissolving?
Her eyes dissolving with a feverish glow
That's
of light.
That's fucking body horror.
Her eyes are dissolving with a feverish glow. It's giving Indiana Jones Ark of the Covenant, the guy melting.
Yeah.
Like his eyes are dissolving with a feverish glow. Yeah, it's that. Mm-hmm. It's giving that vibe. It's not giving like she's incredibly stunning and she's pale and beautiful and has rosy cheeks. It's giving her eyes are melting into her face.
We love that.
And she's turning into, I don't know, a succubus or something.
To be fair, it's important that we point out consumptive chic does not happen in a vacuum, right? The rise of this fashion movement is the compounding of sociological changes with moves to cities, the industrialization and greater technologies being implemented into fashion and beauty, and an all-over shift in the class system and religious overtones, essentially living in radically new circumstances from previous generations. Does this sound familiar?
I don't know what that's like, and I don't know anybody who does.
Yeah, me too.
Nothing major and traumatic and economically shifting has happened in my life over the past 5 years.
I live exactly the way my boomer parents did, and I love it.
Yeah, and I'm living exactly where I thought I was going to be living 5 years ago and doing exactly what I thought I was going to be doing 5 years ago because nothing bad happened in 2020.
I don't have any new apps on my phone that eat up 90% of my time. And
there's no technology that has changed the way I view my face. None.
No. These things peer into a reflection pool.
Like Narcissus.
I was just going to make the joke. These things, when all laid together, make for the perfect cocktail to actually cause tuberculosis to have a literal chokehold on Western culture. Quick overview, tuberculosis, as we've already discussed, is a highly communicable bacterial infection that mostly affects the respiratory system, but it can attack and damage basically any organ in your body. Until very recently, getting tuberculosis meant a violently painful death whose symptoms are frankly horrific. It can sit dormant in the body for decades, and its symptoms can be prolonged or immensely quick. And, the symptoms, my friends, they are fucking gross.
Read them off, but read them off like it's a prescription drug ad. Side effects may include.
In fairness, Elizabeth, I go in for that all the time, and I actually cannot speak that fast. It's just a discovery I have. I can't do it. Prolonged cough that often develops into coughing up blood and chest pain due to the bacteria essentially burrowing itself into your cells and causing an intense autoimmune reaction into any tissue it comes into contact with. And it can travel through your blood, affecting every organ, bone, and bit of tissue. Difficulty breathing, chronic fevers, weakness, fatigue, loss of appetite, in some cases diarrhea, night sweats, back pain, rapid uncontrollable weight loss, and even skeletal deformities. And internal and external abscesses that in some texts I've read described as curdled milk.
Oh my God.
Now, listeners, as she is saying that, I want you to imagine a young woman, very thin, at the county fair with friends, getting ice cream, having a hot dog, getting her picture taken. All of that is the B-roll that is
paddleboarding. She's taking photography class.
She's throwing a pot on a wheel. She's in a pottery class. Like, she is living her best life. Consumption, no more.
Except that all we want is consumption. That's the thing.
True.
All
yes,
we want.
Exactly.
The things that people generally associate with the quote unquote beauty of consumption, so the things that we are after in 1830, were the ghostly pale skin, immense weight loss that created hollowed out eye sockets, enlarging the appearance of those glassy, fevered eyes, dilated pupils, rosy cheeks due to the hectic fever, i.e. a chronic fever, and then the wasting away of the body that led to an elongated neck, sharp cheekbones, curved in and rather, shall I say, demure shoulders that eventually would become so emaciated that the shoulders would physically curve up and out of your body, getting this very cute nickname, angel wings.
Oh.
So romantic. So your shoulder blades would become so gaunt and sharp, and you'd lose so much fat on your body that it would literally look like you had wings coming out of your back.
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
And because of the nature of the way your body would waste away, your rib cage and chest, upper chest, would actually become like convex, or concave. It would sink in.
Yeah.
You would hunch over and you would sink in.
Concave.
You could become hunched.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And you would sink in and you would have this like hunched over posture and this very, very narrow waist. Yeah, Elizabeth is like crooking her hands.
Just glamorous Gollum. Just a glamorous Gollum. My precious angel wings.
Honestly, the Gollum thing is so much more accurate. And there's like 1,000 things we could talk about with the tuberculosis episode. I have edited myself so beyond, and we're still going fucking in. I want to show you guys a couple of images right now for you to keep in mind as we kind of go through this episode. So these are some of the visual changes we'll see most notably in artist renderings, because I think it's really easy for people to say something like, Christina, these have always been in fashion. We're just talking about long-standing archetypes of body and beauty that are Western. But I really, really feel like it's important to stress the way thinness and minimizing women's vitality comes to a head during this period. Mm-hmm. So hold on one second, opening up our chat. Okay. So I want to start here just to give you guys a real like driving home of how much this changes.
Okay, well, I love whoever this first bitch is.
She's so cute.
She
Isn't
looks
she
like
such
She-Ra.
a cutie babe?
She is. Who is she? She's so cute.
Who is she? So who we're looking at is Queen Louise von Mecklenburg-Strelitz of Prussia in 1802, and that is by Vigée Lebrun. And the second painting is Pauline de Broglie by Dominique Ingres from 1851. Now, please don't get on me for these pronunciations. I am American.
I've been calling him Ingres for years, so
Thank you.
I'm glad that I've heard Ingres for the first time. I love these.
I love these. Now, the first one, Queen Louise of Prussia, she was considered at the time, so about 1755 to 1813, to be the most beautiful woman in the world.
I see it.
Can you guys describe like some of the things you're seeing with her?
I would say she has a cherubic face, beautiful brown curls, a slammin' rack.
They're high, they're round, they're sensational.
They are some nice boobies.
Yeah.
She looks like she might have been like short or petite. but very curvy. I don't know if she was
short-boned, you might say.
Short-boned. That's a little Easter egg for another. And she's wearing the sort of Regency style, a very high-waisted, empire-waisted dress that kind of has this like very, I would say, almost Grecian-looking flow. And her lower body looks very healthy and full.
I also just have to point out she is wearing what I think might be described as like a diadem.
It looks like Wonder Woman's crown.
Totally.
Yeah, it is this like Wonder Woman crown. The neoclassical like vibe is strong with her. Also, she's like round cheeked, little like Cupid's bow mouth. She's got these big round eyes, but
doe eyes. Yeah,
she looks healthy. She would be played by who played Arya Stark in Game of Thrones?
Maisie Williams.
She'd be played by like somebody like Maisie Williams crossed with Beanie Feldstein. Like that's who I'm seeing here.
Yeah. So cute.
She's so cute. She's so cherubic. She's also being painted in front of an open sky.
Look at that.
A huge open sky. And I also want to point out like her back is quite straight. Her shoulders are up and back. She's
looking very proudly at the painter.
Very proudly.
It's so wild that this is a 200-year-old painting because it looks like a piece of fan art from a fantasy novel. Like
totally.
Doesn't she look like the heroine on the cover of a fantasy novel?
Absolutely.
It's so funny how like contemporary she looks in her face.
I want to remind you that is 1802. I also want to point out that it's painted by a woman, which I just feel like is part of why she's I know, Vigie Lebrun.
There it is.
Which is like helps. Now I want to go to the second painting.
Sad.
It's sad. Do you guys want to describe this one?
So it's so funny when you compare the two. Listeners, I have seen this painting about a zillion times at the Metropolitan Museum
of Art. Me too. I've always loved it, but now I can't look at it the same way.
Because she looks so depressed and sad and tired. So it's by Ingres. And it is a very slender, very pale woman with big, round, very sleepy eyes, and hunched over shoulders. And the thing that is like most stunning about this painting is her dress. Mm-hmm. She's wearing this beautiful sort of like robin's egg blue gown, and the way that he has painted the fabric is just so realistic and gorgeous. She is wearing beautiful pearls and jewelry and a big gold necklace around her neck. And she is very kind of heavily leaning upon an armchair that is covered in a whole bunch of other pieces of opulent clothing. But it's so funny, again, because I've seen this painting so many times, and when you compare it to that previous portrait, she just looks so sleepy. She looks so sleepy.
She really does look like she wants to go take a nap, and she needs like a B12 supplement.
Somebody get this girl a green juice.
I want to point out that in this painting, she is ghostly pale, but has the slightest pink on her cheeks. Nothing like the flush and the vivacity of the woman we saw prior. She is pale. Her shoulders are sloped. She's leaning as though she's going to fall over. She has sort of like dark circles under her eyes, which I never really noticed.
That. Yeah.
She's got this overly elongated neck, and she has almost no breasts. As far as we can tell, she has almost no breast, these huge sleeves that look like they're going to fall off of her, and like clearly a nipped in waist, because we see this dress shooting out at her ass from like a 90+ degree angle.
Yeah.
The woman we're seeing here, Pauline de Broglie, Pauline here, she actually did have tuberculosis, and she died of tuberculosis. And her husband commissioned this painting, and it's in such good condition. Listeners, if you ever get a chance to see it at the Met, it is extraordinary. And it's in such good condition because it was held behind a velvet curtain while they were in mourning. And so it has almost no exposure to natural light. But I just wanted to point these two women out. Also, again, whereas Louise is Queen of Prussia, is in the fresh air, Pauline here is in a very dark, dank room that seemingly has no natural light whatsoever.
Just one Kino in a corner.
Just one Kino at best. So I feel like I need to address the elephant in the room. Now that we've seen kind of the comparison that like what I am talking about in terms of thinness and illness in fashion is not we've always loved a kind of petite woman or something like that, I need to address this elephant in the room, which is how the fuck did this become popular in the first place? Like, what is wrong with us?
How do we go from Rubens to this?
Yeah, it's not good. So consumption has been around for at least 10,000 years. All over a globe. What the fuck made it so popular? And it's really the rise begins in the 1780s, and it's right at the period we see people begin to move to cities, and they're living in closer quarters, they're breathing in the air of industrialization, and essentially just they're getting sicker. And like, if there's one theme for this episode, it's that white aristocrats are exceptional at one thing: rebranding. Thomas Beddoes, a leading tuberculosis physician at the time, said, quote, "The disorder, however, shows itself in a different form, especially in poor families where children are fed on water and gruel and potatoes. The countenance is then pale, bloated, and what medical writers term cachetic. The upper lip is particularly tumid, the eyes are dull instead of bright. Privation and pain necessarily produce ill temper and sometimes stupidity." Contrast that with the earlier poem, and ladies and gentlemen, we have things that are tacky when you're poor and chic when you're rich.
Oh my God.
That's
it's just the potatoes and the gruel. It's just the potatoes and the gruel and the fact that you're poor.
The level of like self-delusion.
It's wild. And when this new middle and upper class population moves into cities, they got sick. As 3 former New Yorkers, we can all tell you living in a city is fucking dirty and gross. It's disgusting. You will get sick, and when the elite begin to become infected with diseases, as we pointed out earlier, friends, traditionally associated with poverty and squalor and poor living conditions, they had to, what's the word?
Rebrand.
They had to rebrand it.
Make it an aesthetic.
Make it cool. Essentially, particularly British people start to like make this associated with being intelligent. I really love the way Carolyn Day says it in her book. Quote, "The English came to believe that the price of their prosperity and refinement was sickness and pain, and asserted that the proliferation of quote-unquote civilized diseases were a mark of British superiority."
That is so funny to me.
The coastal elite.
Sure, Janet, that's the reason.
You can't have a bunch of upper class folks showing symptoms and like not making it cute. It's very Regina George. It's very Regina George with the nipple cutouts.
Oh my God, it is.
We just are selling it. So between about 1780 and 1830, we have this weird rise in romanticism, and that begins to correlate the concept that consumption brings about genius and beauty. And then that morphs into the idea that people who have beauty and genius lure consumption into themselves and become victims. And as victims, they then amplify their artistic natures and attractive features. It's like the apex of the tormented genius boyfriend. So think like John Keats and Edgar Allan Poe, right? Those kind of moody, angsty,
that anemic
bros. That anemic. Yes.
I'm sick because I'm a genius, and I'm a genius because I'm sick. It's fuckboy Ouroboros.
Completely. And we could go down this whole rabbit hole, but I can't. So someone fucking Google it for yourselves. You'll have a real treat at like the sunken cheekbones of the Eddie Redmaynes of the world. But as this becomes more associated with beauty, it increasingly becomes associated with femininity. So by 1830, we have what is called the sentimentalist movement, which is highly influenced by evangelical culture. This quote, I think, kind of like nails it, again from Carolyn Day, quote, "It's applied yet another way for the women of these classes to distance themselves from the filth, degradation, and related implications that marked the approach to the illness in the lower orders. Evangelical notions of redemptive suffering, coupled with romantic aesthetics, to elevate the frail woman laboring under consumption to a position of not only acceptance, but also of emulation, all under the umbrella of sentimentalism."
The evangelical philosophy of redemption and how that
redemptive
works
suffering.
its way, like it's worked its way into so many different aspects of Western culture that is infuriating. Like everybody's got to be redeemed. Everybody, like your suffering is for a reason, and all. It's just, gross. It's so gross. Sorry, no evangelicals will listen to this podcast.
I particularly want to point out though the marriage, this cross section that happens of the marriage of the redemptive suffering with the romantic aesthetic.
Mm-hmm.
Beauty plus suffering as a woman equals the highest form of holiness.
Put it on a t-shirt.
Yes. And I feel like it's like a kind of a perfect storm. So much of the music that I was trained to sing arises from the Romantic period. A lot of what we consider like the great quote unquote classical music comes from the Romantic era in Europe. And in the literature and the painting as well, it's like it's all about transcendence and this like inner world. And I can just see the combination of these philosophies where it's all about the sort of individual spiritual, like transcending the body. And I can so connect the dots where like this idea that your body wastes away so that your artistic and Holy Spirit can kind of take over or be free from it. And it's just like so, I feel like I'm still trying to learn how to live in my body.
Yeah.
From all of this. You said a mouthful, sister.
And I want to say, like, I think this reminds me so much of our culture right now of optimizing yourself.
Oh my God.
Yes.
Looks, like, masking and
yes. But like, how do I optimize my life to have the most beautiful, chic self? Like, I think this is very much related. So with that being said, let me introduce you to your new favorite TikTok aesthetic, the angels of the household. Ooh. A consumptive woman, particularly a consumptive wife, who was in the upper class, once she was dying, was considered a quote-unquote angel of the household.
I'm picturing like a bedridden woman, like coughing into a handkerchief.
You essentially eventually want to be that, but elegant.
But elegant, but make it chic.
You're on a divan. You're on a fainting couch somewhere. I mean, this was heavy religious influence at its finest, and that begins the kind of that influence that started as that hot, moody boy toy that is ill and wasting away increasingly becomes viewed as overly effeminate and less desirable.
Interesting.
And in fact, as time goes on, it becomes the belief that if a man is afflicted by consumption, it's probably the result of a bad business dealing.
What?
A weak spirit. Or like too much masturbation.
They did think masturbation was really, really bad.
There's a whole other episode on 19th century masturbation. Holy shit.
As much as they hated period blood, they might have hated masturbation more.
Because they were losing all of their essence out of there and wasting their virility. There's something so funny about like it shifting so much into becoming something that is effeminate that it has to be blamed on like if you get consumption, you have to blame it on the fact that you're too girly. Right. You're a little too girly and just a little too gay. And it's not that is the reason you got sick. That is also so fucking evangelical.
Just love the mental cartwheels that people will do.
Simone Biles.
If you can count on one thing, it's that people will literally do mental gymnastics to just make anything suit their worldview.
Completely.
Because I imagine ideas of masculinity are changing anyway because of other
because you're not working, you're not doing hard labor anymore on any level. Like you're not fixing things yourself anymore if you're of an upper class and living in a city.
Well, it's the middle class. That's the thing. You are either an aristocrat or an owner, or you are a laborer. But when you are in the middle, like as the Industrial Revolution starts to take off, all of a sudden there are all these middle jobs as we get more corporate. And this really affects men's sense of masculinity because they're not doing anything with their hands, but they're also not building the business. So where do they fall? And so things like that start to take off in terms of like what defines masculinity, and being seen as too effeminate to get an effeminate disease. That is something that will start tipping the odds in a bad favor for you because the grasp on masculinity becomes so tenuous because of this reorganization of the social structure.
Interesting.
However, if you're a woman and you get consumption,
it's so feminine. It's so chic.
It's so sweet. You
become
so
cutesy. It's so demure.
Very demure. You see the way I cough into my handkerchief? Very demure. Very mindful.
And now our listeners know when we recorded this episode.
They're like, okay, so 8 months ago. If you're a woman and you get consumption, you become the ideal mother, the ideal wife, and the ideal servant of God. consumption becomes the perfect patsy to link, quote unquote, the feminine agenda with suffering. That a diseased woman is the dream, and it allows for what becomes known as the quote unquote beautiful death. This becomes increasingly desirable because it was believed that as a woman became more and more ill, her personality softened.
Oh my God.
It's so interesting to think about the diseased angel of the household being a great mother. Just the contrast of that to like how we think. And again, so much of that is like, if you're an aristocratic woman, you have help. And so it's not like women today can have it all, but it's this idea of it making you a better mother. And I'm like, you're in bed coughing into a handkerchief.
It harkens to the idea of the dead mom trope. And like the mom who's an angel who comes and like holds your face and is like, I'm always with you, darling. And the idea of like you become a living embodiment of the dead mom.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Where like you have no, like the angel mom doesn't yell. The angel mom doesn't lose her temper. The angel mom only has wisdom and kindness and softness. Quote, amidst the ravages which disease made upon her bodily frame, the ornament of a meek and quiet spirit suffered no decay.
The ornament of a meek and quiet spirit. What in the J.D. Vance are you coming at me with?
Oh my God. That broke me.
Oh, God.
Right. That there was no decay on her spirit. The idea that she became holier and wiser was also very clearly shown on her face via the beauty that she was progressing. Those glossy, glassy eyes became open, pure windows into her soul, aka her increased angelic nature. The whiter her skin became, that represented the transparency of her moral character. As her body wastes away, that's a sign that the malady's toll is what it costs to be a woman of true purity. The paler you were, the more transparent your emotions were. The flush of your cheeks was a sign of your sensibility. What reactions, please?
It's again, the mental gymnastics that you will go through to justify something. Somebody has a debilitating, fatal, gross disease. Like, you already listed all of the horrendous things that this woman is also dealing with. Coughing up blood, chronic diarrhea, all that stuff.
Elizabeth, wealthy women don't have diarrhea.
Wealthy women don't even have anuses. They don't even poop.
They don't
even have a butthole. It's completely,
angels
they
of the household do not poo-poo.
But it's like, it's this idea of like, what, like, as you are saying all of these things, I'm like, yes, but at the same time, this woman is very sick. Like, the side effects, the physical side effects might be this element of beauty. And I do understand this idea of these different philosophies coming together in order to justify it, but I can't get out of my head the fact that she is quite ill, and while she may appear angelic and lovely, her body is decaying.
She's dying.
I'm curious, like, how long did someone live like this?
Well, fun question. It could be decades.
Interesting.
It could be very fast.
It could just be sort of like Beth March, like kind of like
so
sickly.
It's a
very and angelic for a long, long time
for a very long time, which is part of why it can kind of be so romanticized.
I was gonna say, if someone looks like this for a week before they croak, that doesn't seem to invite much time to admire their beauty and moral character.
No, but you're slowly wasting away. I mean, some people would deteriorate very quickly, but it could lay dormant for a long time. It would flare up and then come back down. You could be very ill for years.
And I'm sure if you were wealthy, you could probably survive longer in this sort of like slow progression phase.
There's some ways you would do that. I'll talk about it later. I'm pretty excited about it though, so I don't want to get ahead of myself. Do you want something that'll give you a giggle though for a minute?
Sure.
One of my absolute favorite things I saw a satirist say was that nothing can be more horrid than to see a milkmaid's flush amid a town rout.
I want to see sick ladies on the divan. I don't want to see them carrying baskets of onions to market. All right?
I think the reason I love this is because I particularly in this moment think we're obsessed with like cottagecore. Again, this what we kind of think of as like clean girl aesthetic. We're often kind of like, I want to look fresh and flush, but like actually no woman I know who's like trying to look fresh and flushed looks like she's out on a fucking farm.
Yeah,
Right.
they're not actually doing physical labor. And if they are, it's like you're doing it entirely performatively. You're not doing it because you actually need to get those baskets of onions to market.
No.
Yeah, it's none of the, it's like the difference between like aesthetic muscle and functional muscle.
Very different.
It's the difference between like a bodybuilder and somebody who is a rock climber. You're like, those are for show. Those actually work. And it's that difference. It's that aesthetic difference of like, I have a flush on my cheeks from cottagecore, and somebody like, I got a flush on my cheek because I got to get the hay into the tractor to get it to where we need to get it.
Have you seen this new trend where the gals, the little kidlets, they want to look like they are playing rugby. They want to have those like red patchy low cheeks like the rugby boys.
I've heard that called boyfriend blush.
Boyfriend blush. Thank you. That's the title of it.
Is that of all the things we've learned from Alona Mar, that's what we're getting? We're getting boyfriend blush and not, hey, love your body and be strong.
I tried it, but it just looked like clown triangles. I think I need to learn about blending.
Okay. Do we want to talk about how we can actually get this very chic look?
As long as I don't have to get a communicable disease.
Oh, I got bad news for you, girlie.
Here's the thing. Obviously, we can't all be so lucky to have actually gotten consumption. So, how do we fake it until we make it?
To our deaths.
I just keep thinking of that episode of South Park where they wanted all the kids to get chicken pox. So they would get them all together and have them like spit in each other's mouth. It's just like, how do you get tuberculosis? Let's all get together and let's make out and breathe on each other.
There's definitely a lot of like satirical articles that girls were trying to get consumption at parties and would intentionally like not wear enough clothing out in the rain in hopes that they would become ill.
Wait, this sounds exactly like the fear-mongering copy pastas that go around. They're like, kids are doing traffic light parties or whatever.
Right.
Like
It's questionable to say that's real, but also it was very fashionable and like people at the time kind of didn't understand how you got consumption. Mm-hmm. So there's a whole backstory in that too. We don't have time.
They didn't get germ theory at the time. They had a lot of other. They also thought the uterus bounced around the female body. Like medicine in the 19th century was rough.
It's not good. Okay. Let's start with the face, right? What are we doing to the face to get that non-gothy Wednesday Addams look? Because, as they said, in 1813's The Age We Live In, and I think this will resonate, quote, I scarcely know which is the worst, whether to have one's health or one's beauty injured, for I am sure the former is of very little consequence in this world without the latter. Indeed, I cannot fancy a more distressing situation than of knowing yourself to be the ugliest person in the room.
Oh, God. Jesus. I mean, honestly fair.
Yeah.
Honestly fair.
I get it. So, of course, you would never, ever outrightly perform any beautification process whatsoever. This is a very secretive behavior to stay up to the standards. And in fact, by the 1840s, it was already considered to be crass to wear any makeup or portray any vanities, despite the expectation of beauty still being very much on full display. That's a huge change. I think, again, we kind of assume that not wearing makeup is standard. No. 1700s and even into the early 1800s, we're slapping that shit on. And it's totally fine. Like, you wouldn't want to be crazy overt, but you're wearing enough makeup that, like, people know you're wearing something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think of the difference between, like, how you picture someone at Versailles versus how you picture Queen Victoria.
Correct.
Yeah.
Very, very much so.
There's also something interesting about this idea of it being a secretive this now being like a secretive ritual. I think because we are so used to seeing people do their 20-step Korean skincare on TikTok of that moment of like, I'm going to make my perfect face feel lush and do the clean girl aesthetic, but like showing people how to do it because it's become a trend, as opposed to no one can see what I do to my face in order to look sick.
We still have things people do in secret and don't disclose, and then they just tell us it's olive oil in my skincare routine.
Diet and Pilates?
Are you talking about filler, Botox, facelift, arm lipo, and the now very famous Ozempic?
That's yes, I am.
Ozempic? Is that its new name?
Well, I just wanted to be delicate about it. I have no judgment. I think it's like an amazing drug for many people who need it, and also a plague upon a community of women who are already thin. The goal was to look morally unimpeachable. And this reminds me so much of the question, because to look morally unimpeachable, but to still meet the beauty standards, like we talk about this all the time, the three of us off our pod, but like, is it good style, or are you just incredibly thin and beautiful and young and rich and white? Like,
it's not hard to meet the beauty standard if you are the beauty standard.
Yes. Right? Yes.
It's like,
exactly.
Skinny, rich, thin, and white, that's what everyone else is going for a lot of the time, unless you are actively working against it. So, like, good for you.
Okay, so for the rest of us turd Fergusons, how do we do this?
I'm guessing we very demurely and secretively put something on our faces to make us look paler, but also have rosy cheeks.
You betcha, baby cakes. You'd begin by using bismuth, which is lead, or titanium dioxide makeup, or even a common starch powder to make your face a little whiter. Specifically, you're trying to get the popular shades of this time, carnation, which will eventually
Is that white or pink?
Well, it's a white with a hint of pink, but we move away from that to a, quote, sickly shade of lily.
So we're looking for like an albino, but an albino that's gone for a run. Just like a little bit of flush.
And then we just throw it all away, and we're just like a very ill plant.
That peace lily you really need to water.
Yeah. But the thing is, bismuth would be bismuth would beautifully and gently whiten your face. And I really recommend people go and watch Erin Parsons and Lisa Eldridge's videos, actually showing the recipes that they were using, because in candlelight particularly, and like well applied, it's very pretty. It's not the kind of chalky white we often associate with these things. It's like a very soft, glowy, almost like highlighter-y effect.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing about bismuth is that it's a highly reactive chemical, and at the time, there were a lot of scientific exhibitions that were very popular. So if you went there with a date and you smelled the wrong chemical, it could turn your face black. And there were like men's magazines that were like, take your girl to these scientific things, and if her face turns black, she is morally reprehensible.
Take her swimming on the first date.
Oh my God, that's so mean.
It's so mean. So you would do this very beautiful highlighter made of lead. And then you would use often ceruse, which is a deadly compound, I believe made of mercury, to create a flush. You could also use salves that were made from like beetroot or even dampened colored tissue paper, which you could purchase very innocuously. You would just dab that on. You could also use castor oils on your eyelids and your eyelashes. Sometimes you would even tint the castor oil with darkened substances, so you get a nice little fake mascara with shiny
like
lashes.
A brow tint. Yeah.
Castor oil also is good for your eyelashes.
It is good for your eyelashes.
It's great conditioning, so it's also thickening them up. You would also put castor oil and a bit of burnt clove in your eyebrows, which every makeup artist who's ever used the burnt clove is like, this is sick. This is the best shade I've ever seen. And it like applies beautifully. Yes.
Gotta try that.
Does it smell amazing? Does it make you smell like mulled wine?
Every makeup artist I saw do it, like I researched a bunch, and they all were like, oh my God, it smells like Christmas. It's great. And look at the color. It's perfect. It's so ashy. Honestly, like I'm not kidding. I saw a bunch of people reenact these kind of makeup procedures, these like makeovers, these no makeup makeups. And when they're used with a deft hand, they're exquisite. Like legit gorgeous no makeup would do in a heartbeat. But if you're not someone who wants to use cosmetics, you could simply wash with flour water, or better yet, take Dr. James P. Campbell's Safe Arsenic Complexion Wafers.
I love a snake oil.
We love a snake oil.
I love an old-timey cure-all. I just love it.
Safe arsenic.
Safe arsenic.
Very important.
Very demure.
Very demure, very mindful. It's never going to stop.
The indications for uses of this product as provided by the manufacturer are that it works on freckles, moth, blackheads, pimples, vulgar redness, rough yellow, or muddy skins, and other facial disfigurements are permanently removed, and deliciously clear complexion and rounding up of angular forms ensured. Also an absolute specific in dyspepsia, habitual constipation, malaria, neuralgia, rheumatism, loss of appetite, lackluster eyes, low spirits, want of vitality, malassimilation of food, headache, hay fever, etc. 1887.
Pure snake oil. I fucking love it.
I need it. Those are all I love it. It's stamped on the side of this box in all caps, guaranteed absolutely safe and harmless to anybody. Which makes me feel really good.
It looks like a bar of Dr. Bronner's soap. That's the packaging we're looking at here, but it is definitely wafers. And I also, what is vulgar redness? It sounds like orgasmic flush or something. Vulgar redness.
I wish a vulgar redness was an orgasmic flush. I think it's like a pustule, Elizabeth. I think it's a raging pustule.
Don't connect those two things in my brain.
I'm so sorry.
Raging pustule is another great band name. This is more like a crust metal band.
Yeah, for sure.
Like sludge metal, that kind of thing.
I'm particularly fond of the idea of like a arsenic communion wafer.
Oh yeah.
For your beautification.
My beauty.
I feel like there's something about it. So that's some of the things we're doing to our face.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. What are some of the styles that both showcase our frail and ill bodies, or at the very least are going to give the illusion that we too are wasting away?
I imagine the corset is going to come in very handy in this next moment of fashion. If you want to look wasted away, get your waist as away as possible.
Oh,
there it is.
Future Elizabeth, who is also the editor, cut that. That was garbage.
Well, just thinking back to the two portraits you shared.
Yes.
Like looking at the way these silhouettes have changed, we've gone from a sort of very Grecian diaphanous dress that really shows the body's shape to this kind of slopey falling off the shoulders look. And definitely, as Elizabeth said, corsets. And I'm noting how like this style of dress can do a lot to sort of hide and create a very different silhouette on the body than maybe the person actually has.
Sure.
So it seems like we're dressing a lot more not to showcase, kind of diaphanously wrap someone's body, but to sort of present it in a very particular shape.
The clothes are creating a structure.
Correct.
As opposed to like this lovely sort of, again, this like neoclassical look where it is just draping across a lovely sort of like round. You see the plumpness of her body and it's incredibly sexy. And it's very romantic. And then you see this other body that is also the dress is romantic, it less so much her body, if that makes sense.
We don't really see the shape of her body.
Exactly. Right. It's sort of, it's being structured in a very specific way.
Well, the vibe you kind of nailed, but it's bony décolletage, no boobies, very schlumped shoulders, tiny, tiny, tiny waists, huge ass and hips. And you want to sort of be hobbling around with arms like the kids in the Christmas Story. Like, I can't put my arms down.
But what is that coming from? Why are you?
So there's two places that's coming from, and we'll talk about. But both are different styles in sleeves, and they are both designed to cause an impediment in your mobility. Dresses begin to transition a great deal from the late 18th into the 19th century. What you guys both just described is exactly what we're talking about. What we see is that by the 1840s, the breast is essentially completely tamped down, almost entirely trying to make it disappear, which makes sense because if you have consumption, your fatty tissue is withering away by the day. Also, all of these very wide, deep necklines that you're referencing in the Ankh painting, those are designed entirely to create the illusion that your shoulders are more sloped and stooped forward, mimicking the posture of someone with consumption. And they're designed to show off your spinal column, your emaciated collarbones, and your angel wings, if you're lucky enough to have them.
And just so that our listeners can have a bit of like a visual reference in terms of like these big, wide, collared things, think of it like sort of like Civil War era evening gowns on these women. This very wide, low neckline that comes off the shoulders. Not the same like high neckline of the day dress, but very exposed, very, very what Meg was embarrassed to be seen in a bit in Little Women at the ball, right? It's that very wide décolletage, everything on display, but not in a huge cleavagey kind of way, but it's all about the shoulder. It's the decade of the shoulder.
Okay, but why the dump truck ass?
Right. Why the dump truck ass?
I think I know, but I think we need to ask the question.
We're gonna talk about it.
To be clear, I love a dump truck ass.
As do we all.
But first we got to talk about the knockers.
The lack thereof.
The lack thereof. Corsetry changes immensely at this time. I'm going to send you guys a few photos. So here is a corset from the 1700s. And then we've got a corset from the early 1800s. And then I want to show you a corset that's at the end of the century, which is in the 1890s.
Ow. It just looks like it hurts. So the first corset, it goes around the waist. It doesn't look terribly uncomfortable. It's more conical in shape. The second one, we're starting to see that hourglass moment. It's got also like more of a bra situation happening.
It's got like gussets in the boob. It looks like it probably conforms or accommodates the breast a little bit.
Yeah. And then the third one is pure everything you've ever seen in any period drama of a woman trying to look sexy in a corset. This is Satine going to seduce what's his nuts in Moulin Rouge, the Duke. So it is highly like hourglass shaped, very a lot of boning, and that incredible curve right at the waist. Basically everything as we go is getting just a little bit curvier and a little bit tighter around the waist.
Two things happen in corsetry. Firstly, we change the shape of the waist. Stays traditionally used a kidney shape that is formed around a woman's actual rib cage, which we all know is not a concentric circle, right? Like your waist is not a circle.
Right.
If you looked down the barrel, if you wrapped a piece of fabric around it, it would probably look more like a kidney bean. In the 1840s, we start to shift from the kidney shape to a circular shape. That is a huge, huge shift in how we are physically putting a shape around our body. Mm-hmm. Secondly, we have the invention of metal eyelets. Eyelets are the holes that you would thread the string through in the back of a corset. Metal eyelets allow for more tension from the strings to tight lace for the first time. So that imagery of someone with a boot on a woman's back yanking until she can't breathe, that is a satirizing of the tightness that women could suddenly achieve from metal eyelets. Mm-hmm. Not all women tight-laced, but there is a brief period where increasingly narrow waists that are far beyond comfortable do become quite popular. And that does trickle down even to people who maybe weren't following the height of fashion.
We all squeezed into too tight skinny jeans. We all did it.
It's exactly that, right? Like it's fashionable and some people have, like Kim Kardashian can wear a waist trainer in a way that most of us can't and won't, but that doesn't mean I haven't seen plenty of people like wear Spanx.
Right.
To nip their waist into a certain degree. Eventually, what's interesting to me is these corsets will morph into ones that are molded. So that last one I sent you is actually a molded corset. It's made out of hardened, it's almost decoupaged.
Interesting.
So it's not just the boning. It's not just like
it's
the
not
whale
just
boning.
Correct. Like some corsets begin to have stiff material towards the end of the century.
So it really doesn't have any give to your body.
It certainly has a significant amount less. We're starting to get into a place where the idealized shape is about really changing your body as opposed to just faking it. Now, we've got our waists as snatched as possible, but we need to play now a game of padding. Mm-hmm. We amplify the sleeves. So you'll get these big ass sleeves, both in day dresses and in evening dresses. My favorite is that some of them are called the mutton sleeve or the imbecile sleeve.
Mutton I can get behind. It looks like a lamb shank, like in terms of the fullness.
Just sitting here in my idiot sleeves.
My idiot sleeve, that seems mean.
They're both insulting. Your fucking sleeve looks like a giant piece from the butcher.
Like the Renaissance
I can see
fair.
It, though. It is kind of like a drumstick.
Yeah. It's totally a drumstick. You also look like an idiot.
Wow, the judgment coming from Christina for somebody's sleeves. Wow.
And I'm the only one here who wears like puff sleeves shit.
It's very true.
I'm owning myself.
Okay, but I'm starting to see where the dump truck ass comes in.
Yes. So the dump truck ass is coming with the further padding. By the way, both those names come from satirical magazines, and they were so accurate that they stuck.
Interesting.
Chelsea, you're getting there. The larger the sleeves, the smaller the waist. It reminds me of the bigger the bag, the smaller the ass. So, of course, you would also amplify the hips via petticoats. You gotta have a huge ass and huge arms, and then it makes your body look teeny tiny. And this was also very commonly referred to as an ant body.
Oh, I can see it.
For your insectoid thorax.
Because you just had those like poof, poof, and like a beep.
I mean, we've spoken about this before, but it's the illusion that drag queens do. If a drag queen, like classic drag padding is you have to cinch the waist and amplify the hip. And if you're trying to make that hourglass silhouette, you got to cinch and then you got to pad. That's why they got couch cushions and 10 pairs of tights on to have that shape if they are somebody who pads. So yeah, it's the exact same optical illusion, just on actual human women.
It is the exact same. One thing that helps this, by the way, is the invention of the hoop skirt. The hoop skirt comes into play in 1846, which again, I was like, oh, that must have been around for so long. But no, because you can have a steel hoop skirt, which is quite light. And you suddenly don't have to wear like 55 petticoats to get that, that width that you're desiring, which is both more economical because if you're poorer, you could save up to have a hoop skirt, but you didn't have to have as many petticoats made of as many thick fabrics. It also was probably more comfortable.
Oh, like, 1,000%.
In the dead ass of South, like, can you imagine? I'm thinking about like a Southern fucking summer dress.
But it's the idea of like the king and I. They think you are dressed like that because you are shaped like that. And she lifts it up. She's just got bloomers on. And it's that moment of she's wearing a hoop skirt because otherwise she would have had to wear so many petticoats. It would have been so heavy, so much to launder. So, just a whole
prior.
So heavy. It's great for warmth. It's great if you live somewhere cold. But if you are in former Siam, now Thailand.
Yeah, a hot ballroom having a dance.
Yeah, you want to be a belle.
Okay, but also like it makes it really hard to like fit through a doorway.
Oh, Chelsea, I love you.
Sit on a seat on public transportation.
You can't do any of it.
I'm sensing that it's a little bit about restricting mobility.
Those famous 19th century buses.
They had streetcars and trains.
Oh, that's true. There were.
There are so many accounts that say between the large and oversized and often stuffed sleeves and the stuffed skirts of these dresses, most women could not pass through a door. They often had to do, there's like this sort of wiggle shimmy through sideways.
Which I'm sure they eventually was like the alluring movements of a beautiful woman.
I just love the idea of like grabbing one side of the hoop skirt and just pulling it up so that it's like, it's kind of like sideways.
There's something about this that's like very Carol Burnett.
Yes. I saw it in the window and I just had to have it. It's very, it's that.
It's ridiculous. When I was writing this, it really got me thinking about how we utilize these tricks today. When I think of padding, my first thought, as Elizabeth pointed out, is drag or theater performers. But I remembered this video from the truly incredible stylist, Kate Young. She does a video on her YouTube page about what she carries in her red carpet styling bag. For context, Kate Young, firstly, I am a very huge fan of Kate Young, so please don't come for me. I like her a lot, and I hope she likes me back, but she probably will hate me. Secondly, she was Dakota Johnson, Sienna Miller, Michelle Williams stylist. For a period, Margot Robbie, Selena Gomez. She's a very famous stylist. Chelsea and Elizabeth, I asked you both to watch this video. Mm-hmm. Do you want to discuss what she talks about with padding?
Yeah, I'll jump into this. So, Elizabeth, when you mentioned the drag part, I immediately thought about that video and the level of illusion that goes into creating a red carpet look or like a high fashion look for these celebrities. And what Kate Young revealed that I don't know that a lot of people know is that she carries various devices and contraptions for padding the boobs, the butt, the hips, as well as foundation garments that cinch in the waist. Because, and she says, a lot of the time these actresses are so incredibly thin that clothes actually don't hang well on them, or they don't have that curvy silhouette that we want to, that they want, or that we want. So they will pad out their hips and butts and boobs to create the illusion of this ideal silhouette, which is so mind-blowing to me because like it's such a I'm sorry, like actually makes me really mad.
It's
like
also,
we are supposed to look at these women and want to emulate them and go, what's her workout routine? How can I look like her? What's her diet? And they don't even look like that. They are so thin that they've gone beyond looking good according to the beauty standard. So they have to go back and overcorrect.
It's also so wild when you think about a high fashion runway model and how oftentimes they're sort of described as hangers with a head because they're so slender that the clothes just sort of hang on them. And unless it is a particular design, a choice made by a particular designer, every model who walks down the runway has that body. And it is so interesting to think about then when a celebrity, an actor, a singer, an influencer, whatever, gets into one of those outfits and they are also incredibly thin, they still have to fill it out a little bit. Like it's so interesting, that difference between what walks down the runway and what we're used to seeing on a model and then seeing on a red carpet. How is it all of a sudden like, oh, now it's weird. Now it's weird. You're supposed to be representing real people, not the hanger with the head.
That's it. I think what you just said is the nail, which is you're supposed to be representing real people. And I think the way Kate Young describes it is she says sometimes these women are incredibly thin and can look like columns. And I think the illusion we often get from celebrity is that these women have perfect bodies, but what they often have is incredibly thin bodies, which like nothing wrong with a thin body. Like, especially if that's your natural body type, like some people are just long and lanky and lean, and that's wonderful. But I think it is this idea that we are expected to be cobbled together versions of a human being. And the idea that you need to be so thin everywhere so that the right parts of you look thin when you are in a dress, and then we can just pad the rest. And it reminded me so much of this idea of being tubercular and having this fucking gaunt clavicle, and then you have this huge hip, because you wouldn't actually want to see a decrepit body walking around. You wouldn't want to see these bodies in the neoclassical, thin, soft, diaphanous material. It would frighten you.
Yeah. They would look gross.
I think too, like, I don't think there's anything wrong with dressing in a way that gives you the shape of body, the silhouette that you want. I just wish it wasn't a secret. Like, I would prefer that we all lived, like if we all lived in an era where everybody knows, oh, you put on your corset, then you pat out your butt with your panniers and your hoop skirt.
Yeah.
Like nobody's actually shaped like that. We all know this and we all choose to do this or not. But no one's saying you have, well, I know people did diet, but no one is saying you have to like diet and exercise to the point where your body actually is this shape. And it's like, I would so much rather it was common knowledge and practice that we all just like, yeah, I'm staying in my current body. I would like my waist to look a little different. So I'm actually, instead of starving myself, I'm going to pad out my butt a little bit.
There's something so interesting about our understanding of how bodies are manipulated in terms of their shape, because I think most people would think Spanx, corset, bring things in, take what exists, make it smaller with the structure. There's something really revealing about that stylist, and also talking about padding, like of having to make your body as thin as possible and then pad it out.
Yeah.
You know, the in versus the out, like it's one thing to be chubby and put on Spanx, and it's another thing to be to get yourself to be incredibly thin, to have to then artificially round out your body.
Right.
The difference between those two, I find really, because I listeners, I am not somebody who has ever had to pad out anything. I come with it. But I have definitely had to wear shapewear or Spanx or some sort of cinching situation to look quote unquote flattering in whatever I might be wearing. And so this idea that you would be so thin that you needed to pad out your butt, I'm just like, that's wild.
It's wild. And I think something that's interesting that Kate Young does, and I think more people should go watch this video because I think it's illuminating. I am not here to criticize anything she's doing. I think it's illuminating. But I want to show you the absolute fucking height of this period. We get what might seem a little bit more familiar when people think of Victorian women, and these are the covered up, flattened, dark, long-sleeved, sad ladies.
So sad.
Hold, please. Here we go.
Are we going to see an ankle?
God, no.
Heaven forfend.
Escándalo.
I want you to look at these women.
Oh, God. Oh, Jesus.
They look fun.
Listeners, everyone is beautiful in their own way except for these 5 women.
Oh,
what?
no.
I'm sorry. What a group of uggos. This is not a group of attractive women.
Elizabeth. Okay.
Chelsea, look at these women and tell me you see their stunning natural beauty.
I think that their hairstyles are very unfortunate.
This is not an attractive moment. And part of what I want to point out with this, by the way, is this is what fucking no makeup. This is what, like, when they're like, everyone looks beautiful with a natural base. Just put on some lip balm. Like, no.
This really highlights the fact that the exposure time on photos at this time was very long. So you had to hold a pose for quite a long time for the image to be captured. It's why a lot of people aren't smiling in old photos, because you can't hold a smile as long as it takes to expose. Like, it'll start to look crazy. So that's why nobody's ever smiling. And so everyone here just looks fucking sour. And the woman, the second from the right, that is, she looks like every political cartoon of a suffragette, of like the angry, bitter, matronly,
dour-faced
spinster.
Old. Yeah.
Like, this woman is probably 23 and she looks...
I was going to say, do we think they're all 19?
This is like a high school graduation photo.
The hair is also so unfortunate. Their foreheads are all like scraped to the gods. The dead center part. I mean, it's just proof again that like we shouldn't all be wearing the fucking slicked back bun. Like, it's just not for everyone.
A center part is not for everybody. I am not a center part person.
This is going to be the featured image when we post this. Online.
Can't wait.
This image.
And we sound like absolute raging bitches.
But then they'll see them and be like, "Oh, okay, they were totally right."
You also notice that their bodies look really stiff.
They do look very,
So remember I mentioned that, like, I can't put my arms down.
Mm-hmm. This is that.
Literally, the design by the 1850s for a day dress becomes where you want to have the bodice shaped like a T, and you want to make the sleeves as narrow as humanly possible so that the armpits are literally like buoyed out a little bit and bowed out from the sides of your waist, again, making your waist look smaller. The waist also becomes elongated and pointed, so you look lither. You also start to wear a very long busk. A busk is like a piece of wood that you shove down the front of your corset to keep it from, to give you some support. This comes in and out of fashion a lot throughout history, but this one can sometimes go as far down as the pelvis. And between the tightness of the corset and the waist, the immobility you have from your arms, so you cannot move your arms.
You can't bend at the waist either if you've got a bust going down to
bend at the waist.
Coochie, yeah.
So you just sort of sway back and forth in order to walk. Like, it's so uncomfortable.
Women can barely move their bodies and arms in the intentionally restrictive garments of the time in order to limit their mobility so they can be seen as being meek and therefore more feminine and more pious.
More feeble and docile.
Yes, just like they can't leave their homes because they're
so sleepy from all the tuberculosis.
Oh, my tuberculosis.
Oh, no. They made me so tired.
I'm making this image my background on my computer.
You're welcome for that one.
Can I get some merch with these gals on it?
Yeah. Can I share one thing that I do think might be an uplifter here?
Please. I'm looking at this woman's dour face. I need it.
Thanks to tuberculosis, because tuberculosis gave us wellness spas. Tuberculosis is kind of the birth of like what we now think of as a particular kind of wellness spa. Like, I'm going away for the summer.
Just sweat out my toxins.
By the late 1700s, there's a bunch of wellness resorts and retreats in the countryside that eventually become quote unquote sanatoriums, which for a while is a good thing, for the wealthy and ill. They become like destinations. They're described over and over again as having more of the upper class visiting from like just throughout the summer months than any other destination.
God.
All kinds of elite upper class twit of the years are just hacking their lungs up, going out to the countryside, and they would partake in the best summer ever. Or, as Dr. William Saunders said, a program, quote, peculiarly calculated for the pleasure and comfort of the invalid.
All these incredibly smart, incredibly sick upper class people from the cities, all of these angels of the household, they need to come up to the Adirondacks, sit in the chair, get some air.
Some of these places would specifically try to lay claim around healing waters or a specific minerality of the earth that the food was grown in.
I know. I'm from Saratoga Springs, baby.
So we get to 1870, and then sort of all at once things change. Over the first half of the 19th century, we see a rise in this idea of the fallen woman who usually has consumption. Okay. And she is saved by the morality of the consumption. It's this like trope of the saved woman in all of the romantic operas and literature, which then slowly begins to create the connotation of prostitution or poverty, once again with tuberculosis.
The pendulum swings back.
It starts to swing back.
But it's not entirely a bad thing, it sounds like you're saying. Like,
well, it starts as being a good thing. Like, oh, if you have consumption, you're a woman who becomes morally saved. But then that starts to get placed upon women who are of, quote unquote, lower moral character. And so then consumption begins to be associated with like a Santine or a Fantine character, women who are participating in sex work or devious schemes, and they are saved by consumption. But then that starts to associate these low moral characters with consumption.
So it stops being redemptive eventually, and it's only just associated with...
The redemption is different. You're redeeming you become a fallen woman who is redeemed, as opposed to a woman of high class and intelligence and cosmopolitan sophistication.
Sure. Becomes someone who needs to be redeemed.
There it is. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think that's what it is.
As a person who benefits from the redemption of tuberculosis.
Right. And by the 1850s, there's finally a general consensus that tuberculosis is a communicable disease that in large part thrives in poor communities because there's less space.
How far are we from germ theory? Like, I know we're getting close, right?
Can I be honest? I'm not great at this. I don't know.
Hey, Elizabeth from the editing bay. The general consensus is germ theory was discovered in 1861 by Louis Pasteur, but it took a while for everybody else to catch on. All right, back to the episode.
I took it out of this one.
Later 1800s, though.
Yeah. We're like right around here is when people are definitely arguing for germ theory at this point heavily, but there's also a heavy disagreement. But we're increasing towards people understanding that your spit is gross.
Right.
We all know that. We all lived through 2020.
Right. And then with that, with germ theory, it becomes thought of, consumption becomes thought of more and more as a biological evil. Here's the thing. Once we are presented, though, with this new degree of thinness, we accept it as the new status quo, and we never go back. From this period forward, waists continue to shrink down in magazine depictions. We never, ever, ever go back to the fullness we saw pre-consumption. I will say, what happens is by the 1860s, we get the rise of the Gibson girl. I have to read this. It's like, this Wikipedia description of it fucking is a manic pixie dream girl casting breakdown, and I just cannot. They described the Gibson girl as, quote, she was a member of upper middle class society, always perfectly dressed in the latest fashionable attire, appropriate for the place and time of day. The Gibson girl was also one of the new, more athletic shaped women who could be found cycling through Central Park, often exercised, and was emancipated to the extent that she could enter the workplace. In addition to the Gibson girl's refined beauty, in spirit, she was calm, independent, and confident, and sought personal fulfillment. She could be depicted attending college and searching for a husband, but she would never have participated in the suffrage movement.
I just love that she's like a trad wife. She's like living her life. She's going to the gym. She's maybe taking some classes, but don't you dare have a political opinion or like there's no enfranchisement here. That's so interesting. This like pinnacle of womanhood and femininity that with a very, very strict and thick glass ceiling.
Yes, very. I'm going to read you this description of a desirable presentation and what it denotes. And I would like you guys to tell me, because this has been the thing for me this entire episode, is do you think this is from the Victorian era or do you think it applies to now?
Okay.
Any makeup worn should be very natural. Should showcase natural skin color, which is very fashionable. Skincare is preferred over makeup. Most ingredients in the skincare should come from the kitchen or the garden. Creams and waters can be made from things like almond oil, elderflower, lemons, lilies, oatmeal, roses, and violets. You can use sugar, making it into a scrub, or use it as an exfoliator. Creams are more expensive, so water is preferred by girls who don't have as much disposable wealth.
I was with you on everything modern until you got to water, because there's something we all love and it's a moisturizer. But everything else is like crunchy granola and I went through this phase too of like washing my face with honey and using like I still have some Aztec clay mask of everything being super natural, super earthy, everything from your kitchen. There is
this now or is this about Victorian?
I mean, when you said it's like skincare is preferred over makeup, that like I feel like I just read that today. It doesn't, ditch your makeup. It's all about healthy skin.
And it's like, yeah, that's great if you have the genetics and the money to pay for it. But I'm like, some of us are almost 40 and still breaking out around our period. And it's like, there's only so much you can do with the money and resources available to you and your genetics. We have talked about this before. I thought I was going to get such a lovely break during COVID, not wearing makeup every day because I was sitting at home, and I was like, no, I'm still breaking out. I just have shit skin, and so it's you can understand why people pay hundreds upon thousands of dollars on the latest skincare to get their skin looking amazing, as opposed to going through the effort of putting on a foundation.
Well, and the idea that if you buy someone's skincare or if you buy this cream that J-Lo uses, that is the same as like what is likely $100,000 a year dermatologist bill, regardless of if she's getting fillers or facelifts or anything, like just point blank.
She's one of those people that I feel like gets like daily diamond microdermabrasion.
Yes,
you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Like there's no way anybody's skin looks like that at the age of 50.
Good for her. If I had that kind of money, if I had fuck you money, oh, you better believe I'm getting that Paris Hilton hyperbaric chamber in my basement.
Just a new face every day. Just cracks off.
Yeah, it's just it's Brazil. Has anyone seen the movie Brazil?
No.
Oh my God.
The Terry Gilliam movie?
Yes. Honestly, it's worth a watch. It's disturbing.
Chelsea, what were you going to say? Sorry,
I was going to say, Christina, you and I have talked about this. Like, even if a celebrity says, I've never had surgery, I never had plastic surgery, like the types of things they can afford to do that don't fall under surgical intervention are things that like not only can most of us not afford, but we haven't even heard of.
Oh,
so
beyond.
It's completely disingenuous to say like, I've never had any work done when like that $8,000 facial, technically you doesn't count as having work done.
A laser, all kinds of things. And like, again, zero judgment. Good on you. You do whatever you want to do on your face.
Yeah,
1,000%.
I'd be lying if I said I wouldn't do it if I could. But let's be real.
Right. So that thing that I just read, was regarding the Victorian.
Of course
beauty
it was.
standards.
I love that they were also into like clean ingredients.
But that's what I'm saying. It is the fucking clean girl aesthetic. This idea that you're using flower water, that you're not wearing any makeup, that you are high maintenance to low maintenance is what we call it now, right? Like you get Botox twice a year and you get your nails done 3 times a month, so that like you wake up like this. I get my lashes tinted so I don't have to worry about anything. Like all of this is the weird fucking lie that we're telling ourselves, that this is how I don't wear makeup to the airport. And then someone applies like 15 pounds of concealer.
Yeah.
Like this weird morality though.
And also the weird like investment. It's like shopping at Costco. It's like spending a whole bunch up front so you don't have to do it in small drips later on. It's like getting your eyelashes tinted is more expensive than the tubes of mascara you have to buy. Or like all of your skincare is going to be more it's the upfront investment that you are willing to put down in order to seem effortless. And I'm like, the amount of effort that is and money that is going into this.
It's all of it. And again, I really want to point out this, like I saw this time and time again when I was looking up like clean girl aesthetic, because there was so much of like, I like to not wear makeup on the weekends. And then it was literally someone wearing like a full coverage tinted sunscreen and then a butt ton of concealer. And then they'd do 15 other products and they'd be like, I don't like to wear makeup. And it was so interesting to me because I was like, what's wrong with if you want to wear makeup to the airport?
Also, what do you think makeup is? Like, what?
But that's the thing. But it's all sold to us as this like Chelsea, you sent me a video forever ago where it was a woman who's like, here's how I look good without wearing any makeup. And it was all like quote unquote skincare that was all quote unquote tinted.
Right. So it's a tinted serum.
It was foundation.
It has probiotics in it.
It still has tint
makeup.
in it. There's still some
if your
mica powder in it.
sunscreen has tint that is a color of skin, it's foundation. I'm sorry.
Which there's nothing wrong with.
There's nothing wrong with.
But there's a moral judgment about if you are someone who is putting on makeup on the weekends or to the airport, and if you can find a way to say, I don't like to wear makeup because I like to let my skin breathe. There's a moral judgment.
It's clean, it's healthy, it's low maintenance.
Mm-hmm.
I can't deal with the people who judge what people wear at the airport. I'm like, people who are like, oh, I dress for a plane. I'm like, I look like a hobbit when I fly. Like, I am in sweatpants and a neck pillow and like, don't bug me.
Airport is God's country. Every man for himself.
But also, I want to point something out, which is that like this whole fucking idea of airport fashion really only works if you are thin, young, wealthy, white, beautiful. Listen, some people can pull off wild things, but like wearing a pair of dad sneakers and a matching sweatsuit, if you are not Hailey Bieber, you just look like a Midwestern mom who's trying to get through.
Yes.
Yeah.
I see people in that outfit. I live in a very historically blue collar neighborhood of Philadelphia, and I see older people rocking that outfit all the time, and nobody is taking their pics for street style.
No one.
Chic. I do have to say, speaking of people flying in awesome outfits, this is a total side note. When I flew to Barcelona, from JFK to Barcelona, there was a number of people on the plane that was like an older African-American like group, maybe like they were like a tourist group all together. And the woman I sat next to was in it. She was roughly 75, 80 years old, red leather suit.
Sick.
For an 8-hour flight across the ocean.
That's brave.
To Barcelona. And I was like, I want to be you, but I'm still in leggings and a college hoodie. And that's what I feel comfortable
I'm just picturing like the way I would be stuck to the seat after 8 hours.
I was just thinking like the camel toe, like the situation of a leather pant.
I'm peeling off like a color form.
Yeah.
At the end of the flight.
But yeah, I will never forget her.
Any final thoughts before we get out of here?
I think, Christina, this is so good. And this idea of secretive versus performative, of virtue signaling with your performance, of virtue signaling with your secretiveness, women who dare to show effort, women who dare to, it's such a fucking tightrope, the idea of this clean girl aesthetic, of having your body and your face be your beauty as opposed to anything artificial, but then using so much artificiality to make your body and face look the way it does. It is, again, it's fuckboy Ouroboros, but it's clean girl Ouroboros. There's just, it just snake eats tail.
Yeah.
Ugh. And like, what are the ways we continue to make ourselves ill, like psychically and physically, and how we have come to associate that with wellness.
Right.
And redemption.
Like, yeah. Ugh.
It's tricky. I know it's a bold statement, but I really do believe that like tuberculosis in the consumptive chic era kicks off kind of everything we have in modern beauty. But I really, more than that, believe that, like I said in the beginning, we are in the sister epoch. We really are in the reflective pond of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that there's such a resistance to acknowledge that the things that we look back on, we're like, oh my God, that's fucking insane that people did that. And I was like, literally injecting botulism into my face.
Exactly. That is the central thesis of this entire podcast, of just like, it's all been done before. You are not better than the people of the past. You may know a little bit more, but the instincts are still there.
Yeah.
The vanity remains.
Vanity remains.
Vanity remains. We are still willing to put ourselves through absolute and utter bullshit to meet whatever beauty standard we need to at the time.
Yeah. I just want to wrap this up, but I want to say something I saw time and time again when I was looking up the clean girl, the vanilla girl, the that girl, was this notion that, quote unquote, looking elegant is looking put together, or it is looking like you, quote unquote, take care of yourself. And I want to ask, what does that actually mean in this world where we're discussing virtue signaling with how we're moving around in this body we're born with? I believe, much like in the 19th century, we have layered in the complete shift in how we live our lives. Instead of moving into cities, though, we've moved online. Technology has transformed what we wear and the beauty we participate in. And what was once metal eyelets and molded corsets, it's Ozempic, it's body augmentation, it's facial injectables. Hell, it's like filters that have fundamentally changed the way we're all viewing our skin. We think we should be poreless babies' buttholes. I guess what I'm trying to say is, don't let beauty consume you.
Oh my God.
There it is. There's the button. We found it.
I hate you.
I'm sorry.
Title of episode. And that's our show. Thank you so much for listening. If you like this episode, please tell your friends, and be sure to follow us on Instagram and all other social media at Vanity Veritas Pod. We will be back in 2 weeks, but in the meantime, remember, trends come and go, but vanity is timeless.